So recently I've become a very big fan of Dr. Thomas Sowell. Dr. Thomas Sowell has a PhD in economics, and he is just so great. He has so many quotes that sum up what is wrong with the modern worldview on economics and culture and poverty and everything else. He's just the best. And there's one thing he said. He points out that oftentimes we look at the people who are very poor in our world, people who are starving and can't get by, they can't get enough money to feed their family, and there's no choice about it, they're dying. And we ask, what is going on here? What caused this? What led to this awful condition for humans? And I think that's the wrong way of looking at it. Well, it is the wrong way of looking at it, because human beings, for the vast majority of human history, were living in awful conditions where they were starving and in the worst poverty you can imagine. And all the evidence points to this. There's some people who say that we came from this kind of Garden of Eden-esque environment where everyone was well off and lived in harmony and cooperated and nobody went hungry. And that's just a fantasy. It's like a fantasy that's, I think, inspired by religious dogma, but people continue on believing it in these kind of New Age circles or these progressive secular circles, even though there's no evidence of it. And it's one of these ideas that just exists and continues to exist no matter how much it's challenged with evidence. All the evidence points to the fact that prior to a few hundred years ago, most of the world was in way worse conditions than it is today in terms of violence, in terms of poverty, in terms of all of these things that we value in our modern world. And so we shouldn't be asking what leads to poverty, because poverty was the norm. We should be asking what led to this exception, this recent exception. What led to us breaking from the norm into this age of vast wealth, peace, and prosperity, like this modern age we're living in. We're like, the degree to which we kind of shit on our modern age is amazing to me. When we have so much more wealth, we are, especially in places like Canada where I am, we live in such a peaceful place. It's amazing the age we live on, and yet we criticize it. And what Thomas Sowell says, and what so many economists say, is what led to this huge blossoming of wealth is things like rule of law and property rights and the right to freely compete and innovate, having a free market of both ideas and a free market of innovation, and rule of law to restrain the predation of opportunistic criminals and things like that. And this has long been observed to be the case, and yet people still advocate these, breaking away from this consistently applied justice, or breaking away from free market economies in pursuit of government monopolies. And it's just insane, and it's so sad to me that so much of the world wants to go back in the opposite direction, wants to go back into the dark age from which we crawled ourselves out of for like hundreds of years. Like, so many people bled and died and worked their entire lives to try to bring us to this age where, like in our modern age, someone living on minimum wage can live like someone with 200 servants a couple hundred years ago. There's a stat about that somewhere out there that's more specific. It's something like, yeah, we live like royalty, and nobody appreciates it. All we do is complain about the fact that there's this wealth disparity. There's like, some people have all this money and we have less than them. That's just insane. Like, obviously, yeah, that wealth disparity is in part produced by the free market, because there's so much more wealth, there's more disparity. But like back in the day, everyone was dirt poor except for the rare royalty or people who were completely just so lucky. And yeah, it's just unfortunate that we don't appreciate what we have, and we oftentimes advocate a philosophy that would send us back to the dark age and send us back to the worst version of what we're complaining about. Yeah. People. Cray cray.